Hello, and welcome to A Critical Dragon, where I talk about narrative, film, television, and in books, and occasionally have a certain nemesis, Dr. Philip Nemesis Chase, on to have discussions with me. Hello, Philip.
Hello, AB. It is wonderful to be here and fulfilling my nemesis role, which
Your,
makes me very happy.
your nemesisitude?
My nemesisitude. Yes, indeed. One must fulfill one's nemesisitude with certain frequency in order to keep in practice. So, yeah.
Well, the reason I have invited you here today, my friend, sorry,
Yes.
my nemesis, my enemy, uh,
Right.
is when we started out discussing the Malazan Book of the Fallen.
Yep.
Did a non-spoiler talk and then a spoiler talk about Gardens of the Moon, and it was just on your channel because I didn't have a channel back then.
Correct.
And
Yes.
now I'm sort of going back and re-looking at the books in the Malazan Book of the Fallen, but
Yeah.
from a full series spoiler point of view. And I thought this would be an excellent opportunity to have a spoiler discussion about Gardens of the Moon with full series spoilers with you because we didn't do that. So I was really looking forward to this.
Yeah, same here. Actually, I've been excited about your series for quite a while because you actually told me about this idea a long time ago. But to see that initial introduction video got me really excited because I think it's going to, what you're doing is going to shed a lot of light on moments in the series that are going to be opened up in new ways, I think, for a lot of readers, including myself. And I'm really excited about that. And so, yeah, I'm ready to chat about whatever aspects of this. You did release your video already on Gardens of the Moon, and I think you got some nice feedback from that, correct?
Yeah, there was a question from one of the commenters, Tristan. And while it is not a Gardens of the Moon specific question, I thought this would be a good opening discussion point because Tristan actually had asked, because I had emphasized so much that how Tavor is central to the story. Oh, by the way, before I go any further, this is
Spoilers.
full series spoilers. Please, if you have not read until the end of the Crippled God, I don't want to ruin
Yeah,
the series for you. This is
yeah.
full series spoilers, and I caught myself because I was about to say something there before giving the spoiler warning. Spoiler warning has been given.
So just for the Malazan Book of the Fallen,
Yeah.
or yeah, okay. So don't worry if you haven't read novels of the Malazan Empire or the Carcanis trilogy or the two books out in it, or et cetera, et cetera. So just Malazan Book of the Fallen, full series spoilers.
Yeah. But Tavor is absolutely central to Camonsod's story.
Yeah.
And Tristan was wondering why. If Tavor is so central, why doesn't Camonsod give us more information about
Hmm.
Tavor? Like Steven Erikson has, and this is what he pointed out, that Steven Erikson has said in the past that he wanted to hold back from certain characters to make
Right.
them more mysterious, to make it just an external perspective of them. And that makes sense from an authorial point of view. But why would, if the conceit is that it's Camonsod, why would Camonsod do it?
Hmm.
So, like, I have my theory about this. I have my answer to this. But do you have anything before I launch into a long-winded rant?
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to squeak this in here. I do think that Tavor becomes more present. She does not at all. She's not mentioned even. I think. Oh no, she is. Actually, she is. She is present in Gardens of the Moon as a young person, right? So we do have
When
her
when Ganos goes
briefly
home.
when Ganos goes home. So we do actually have her in here. So she does appear. She doesn't seem like she's going to become such a central character necessarily. So she is present. We were introduced to her. And I have to think that Steven Erikson already knew that she was going to take on a much bigger role down the line and was showing us some fairly important character traits of Tavor in that early scene when Ganos goes home. And we see a kind of strange maturity to this person. I think she's pretty young in that scene, right? I mean, I
Mhm.
don't know how young, but she's pretty young. She's not that much older than Felison, is she?
Well, she's older than Fellison.
Right.
Like quite. She's. I always got the impression. Ganos is the eldest.
Right.
Tavor is only slightly younger than him, and then
Okay.
Fellison was the baby of the family.
Okay. But Tavor even seems like the most mature of the three, even in that scene in some ways. She's very serious, very quiet. You can tell there's a lot going on here,
Well,
So
Ganos
yeah.
has gone out gallivanting. He's turned his back on the family business, on being a
Right.
proper noble, so he can go and play soldier.
Yeah.
You know, you can understand why Tavor sort of Ganos.
Yeah, there's got to be some of that there. So she's already taken on a role of responsibility, which again tells you a lot about her future. The fact that she would take on that kind of responsibility at such a young age. But also, I feel that even aside from that scene, when we do get our introduction to Tavor, I feel like it's a very important thing to point out that in Lorne, we have our first adjunct. We're introduced to the role of adjunct. And the role of adjunct is just as important to Tavor as it is the fact that she's Tavor. I think that is simply an essential part of who she is and the decisions that she is forced to make as far into the future as the Bone Hunters, right? Where she is confronted by Lysine in that incredible scene on Malaz Island, where the Bone Hunters are basically going to be sacrificed for the sake of the Empire. They want
The Wiccans are.
They want the Wiccans, yeah. But they're willing to kill the Bone Hunters if they get in the way, So, but that moment where Tavor is presented with an option to play the game, to play a certain role, because Lysine recognizes her abilities, recognizes that she's a very capable, strong, talented individual. So she's like, all right, play with me, and we'll have to get rid of the Wiccans. But Tavor refuses. She doesn't do what's in the best interest of the Empire. She doesn't play the role she's been groomed for. Whereas Lorne in Gardens of the Moon is very much confronted with a very similar situation. She's told, here, you have this mission, and it's going to involve killing a lot of people, sacrificing some people, innocent civilians and so forth. That's just part of the deal when you're working for an empire. It's that's what happens. So Lorne, although she's clearly torn about this, and although we do get some insight into Lorne's character, her complexity, where she's coming from, particularly in that wonderful dinner scene where she confronts Tattersail. We get some insight into her as a human being, and we see her reluctance when she goes to awaken Raced, when she goes to awaken the Jagged Tyrant. There's a reluctance there. There's a hesitation. So we see her also confronting a similar decision, I think. And she makes the opposite choice, obviously. She decides to do what's right for the Empire, to deaden her humanity in that moment. And unfortunately, for Lorne, it doesn't work out too well.
Slightly forlorn.
Yes, indeed.
But puns aside, we can mirror that dinner scene with the conversation that Lysine has with Tavor. The dinner scene with Dujek and Tattersail. That is the precursor, the foreshadowing of what Tavor is going to do.
Right.
And in that, we see Lorne makes the decision to be adjunct, whereas Tavor makes the decision to be Tavor.
Yep.
So we see the two different directions. And obviously that's something that both Erikson and Erikson through Camonsod do repeatedly throughout the series, which is set up, here's the decision. Oh, you think we should do this thing. So we're going to let it play out. Then show us essentially a different character faced with the same issue, dilemma, or situation, and then play out the alternative to show us how that happens. That happens repeatedly in a lot of different situations all the way through.
Hmm.
But I think you're exactly right that Lorne is the prologue version, the proto version of Tavor. And it's through understanding Lorne that we understand Tavor and how Tavor is going to react to certain things. Ganos, as a noble, has infiltrated the military and is, on his way up to captaincy. This is
Hmm.
one of the things that the Malazan Empire does not like. Lo and behold, in the next book, we find out that there's been a cull of the nobles because, oh, the nobles have been infiltrating the military. I wonder who that could be.
Hmm.
Did we just read a book about a captain who is a noble? So Ganos and his career trajectory in the army is one of the elements that leads to the noble cull that has Felison sent away.
Hmm.
So that is well established. And again, the Tavor as adjunct, trying to play the role of adjunct
Right.
instead of just sentencing her sister to death, plays the royal servant and tries to find a way to undermine it, work within and around the system.
Yep.
And we see it doesn't work out, but it is a key aspect of who she is, the struggle that she is going through.
Yeah.
Because she sends Pearl to try and find Felison. This She is obsessed with finding Felison,
Right.
saving Felison. She organized a talent to accompany Felison and be
Bowden. Yeah.
Felison's bodyguard. She
Yeah.
has done everything that she can to protect her younger sister, but she
Right.
doesn't know what has happened to her. Then we see the tragedy of her killing her sister.
Yeah.
And at the very end, the thing that Camonsod sort of witnesses Tavor say is when she meets Ganos, and it's Ganos, I've lost her. And Camonsod is trying to understand family. He's trying to understand Tavor. He's trying to understand these people who have sacrificed so much. And many of the other people he has a handle on. He understands their position. And that's a lot of the characters then that we get the perspective of are the ones that Camonsod is most comfortable understanding their position. But there
Hmm.
are certain characters that Camonsod just cannot figure out. One is Animander Rake. And he figures quite prominently in Gardens of the Moon. We get an external view of him. Why would this be an external view? Camonsod, as a god, would have a good insight into Rake, except Rake's sacrifice in Toll the Hounds is something that Camonsod just can't figure out. He doesn't understand Rake.
Right.
And because he doesn't understand Rake, it's all the reported external views. If I can't understand him, I'm not going to try and pretend to put his thoughts down on the page. I'm going to investigate it to try and figure it out. It's almost like Camonsod trying to piece together the evidence to understand Rake. And that's what we have with Tavor.
Hmm.
This human who has sacrificed everything.
Yep.
And even after all of this sacrifice, the thing that she is still fixated on is her sister.
Yeah. It occurs to me that these people have something in common, these entities, your Animander Rake, your Kellenved, your Tavor, the ones who are that we stay back from a little bit and let the mystery of these characters steep a bit. The thing that they all have in common is that they all buck the system. In addition to acting and in the case of Rake and Tavor in clearly sacrificial ways, and maybe you can even argue Kellenved in some ways, although you're never really sure what he's getting out of it or not. But if you put him together with Dancer, but they all seem to be ready to buck the system, whatever the system might be. It could be an empire, right? It could be, okay, we've all decided that we're going to chain this god and tap into his power and use him. And we've all gone along with this for however many thousands of years this has been going on. and the one who stands up and says, no, no, this isn't right, that's bucking the system. So I think that all these characters, in a way, that Steven Erikson has chosen to take a step back from and examine from the outside, are people who are willing to sacrifice but also buck the system. And I think that probably is telling.
Yeah, and it's fuzzy because obviously, yes, the authorial perspective is to create mystery about a character or to hold back a character so they don't become as mundane, as prosaic. If we knew their innermost thoughts and all of their speculations and plans about things, it
Right.
it can remove some of the mystique of the character. So that's an authorial reason to do it. But
Right.
Camonsod actually does have a genuine reason for certain characters just being unknowable to him. And so much,
Yeah.
if we think of one of the through lines, Kellanved and Dancer and the Found family, like even refer to the old crew that they sort of had built up as were the family.
Right.
We have such a strong focus on siblings and friendships that evolve into family bonds. All of these different things. Kellanved is a singular entity. Or sorry, not Kellanved. Camonsod is a singular entity.
Yeah.
And
He's alone. He's alone. Alienated.
alien and alienated,
Yeah.
tortured, unloved, hated, feared. And he's trying to wrap his head around, I think, family and love and these sorts of bonds. And that's partly what I think makes Tavor so unknowable to him. He wants to understand her, but doesn't feel that he does. That there's a limit to his omniscience. That, like all of the other gods in the Malazan world, he's not fully omniscient. He's not fully omnipotent. That there are limits to his sight, his insight, and his power. And I genuinely think that's a very strong element of it. These characters that do things so unexpectedly and for reasons he can't understand. And because of that, he doesn't feel that he can put down on paper what he believes their motivations are.
Right.
So I mean, to me, that's how I would approach answering that. Obviously Steven Erikson may have a different view of it, but
He might.
Death of the author.
Yeah. Who cares? Who cares what he thinks?
He was very mean to me on that live stream we did, so I'm getting my own back.
He was having a good time being a heckler. Yeah.
So that's one of the things that fascinates me about a lot of the series is that when we take into account Camonsod's perspective, all of these key players are in and around Pale and Darudistan at this time. That it's a lot of these different elements that we are now going to see replicated again and again and again and explored in greater depth in each of these individual volumes. And it's introducing a lot of the key players. And as you point out, like Tavor is there. She's introduced. And it's like, I think Erikson described it as an overture. I described it as a prologue. It's having the thing there at the very beginning, the very first section of a grand narrative to go, here's all of the bits and pieces, and these figures are going to drift in and out. But it's introducing the themes, it's introducing the conceits, it's introducing all of these elements.
Yeah.
And that's at the heart of it, these decisions that are getting made. And then when you tie it in to the sort of the thematic thing. So Raist is a monster, from an unknowable past. He is this terrible monster. And yet, no, it turns out he's just a bit misunderstood.
He also loves cats.
Well, like I said, he's a monster.
Oh, no. You're gonna lose some subscribers for that one.
But half the people are going to go, oh, that's horrible, and then the other people who are dog people going, oh yeah, well, cats. I don't like cats. I like dogs. But we can see how Raced's position is in
Right.
some ways mimicking Camonsod's position later on,
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
and the evolution of Raced, and how we find out that Raced Raced wasn't being evil just for evil's sake. There were things going on, and it gets more complicated. And the more that we have context, the less straightforward things become. And
Right.
I think that is part of what Camonsod is focused on, trying to understand when when is it okay to forgive? When is it okay to be forgiven? Can we be redeemed?
Hmm.
What are the things for which we can be redeemed? Is there anything that is beyond redemption? Is there anything that we can work our way back from? That forgiveness, compassion, empathy, all of these different things that he's exploring. Because ultimately, he has received the greatest and most unexpected gift from these people.
Right.
And he is, I think, just genuinely confused by it.
Well, I think the focus on redemption is telling as well, because Camonsod must be wondering, am I redeemable? I did some horrible things. I am responsible for, I mean, you could just take any one of the many things that he was doing in order to inflict suffering and pain on the world. And so the question occurs, there are certain characters that people talk about within the series as to whether they're redeemable or not. And, you could name quite a few. Maybe.
Well, Karsa is probably the one that springs most to mind that people
Karsa,
debate because he
right?
commits horrendous acts.
Right?
And you go, how much of that is the environment in which he was raised? How much of that is due to like the whole nature nurture debate?
Right?
And how much do we then excuse because that was how he was raised? And
Right?
well, because it was a different culture, we get into that cultural relativism and moral relativism that Camonsod is, I think, exploring these questions. I don't think he comes up with a definitive answer. He's
No.
putting this forward so that people can travel along with him in this exploration of the complexity of the human condition, in the complexity of how we arrive at these things, and how quite often it is not cut and dried. There
No.
are extreme examples, and we see that. Itkovian is an extreme example of all-encompassing empathy and compassion,
Right.
but Bidithal is an extreme example of corruption and evil. That
Yeah.
there are extreme examples. It's not to say that everything is uh, minutely shaded.
It's interesting because I think not many people would say that Bidithal is redeemable. And yet, how many children did Camonsod maim? How many children did Camonsod kill? How many people did Camonsod? I mean, it's either directly or through his machinations.
Or
Yeah,
or
and there's no
when
scale, but obviously, right?
and again, it quite often because Kalimved is amusing, because Shadow Throne is this
Yeah,
cackling fool at times
right.
that we kind of we enjoy him and we're willing to forgive the fact that when Kalam requests aid to save all of those children, that they get turned into an army that Kalimved is going to use.
Exploit. Yeah,
Yeah, because child soldiers, that's what good guys do. Um,
right.
the the bridge burners. Oh yeah, Whiskey Jack, we love him. He's brilliant. He's an honorable, decent, heroic, grizzled veteran character
Who was
who
going to blow up civilians?
who was going to blow up civilians
Yeah,
and had no qualms about it whatsoever. Oh, Kalam. He and Quickben, they're really good friends, and Kalam will always stick up for him. And Kalam, the assassin who murders people in their sleep.
right.
Right. The, and it's challenging a lot of our assumptions about these things, and that's what I genuinely enjoy when we look at the story of Crocus and Sorry.
Mhm.
Crocus and his self-delusion. Crocus believing himself to be this hero, this roguish hero, much like, and you can mirror Perrin with that as well. Perrin imagines himself almost as the heroic knight errant. That's, you
Yeah.
can see that sort of drive, these self-delusions, and they are being challenged time and time again by the reality and the complexity of the situation. That happens explicitly in Gardens of the Moon, where Crocus believes that he loves Chalice.
Mm.
Chalice, the unattainable object of his desire, literally object. She is a chalice. She is a sacred vessel.
Yeah, the Holy
And
Grail. Yeah.
it turns out he has been deluding himself. He has not been considering her and her needs and her as a person. He has
Yeah.
been looking at her as an object and creating an entire fantasy out of this image of her.
Yeah.
And
You could
that gets
also
challenged.
argue that when they do finally have an affair in Toll the Hounds, that they are, in this essence, using each other at that point as well. That she's certainly using him, but he's also using her. It's a sort of a sad end for Chalice, that's for sure.
But and when we see sort of Crocus's journey, the love that he thought he had for Chalice
Mm,
is very much that adolescent puppy love, lust sort of obsession. And it wasn't of Chalice the person, it was of this image. Then he sort of hooks up with Sorry as she becomes Apsalar, and they travel around, and it's messy and it's complicated, and he's trying to impress her and do the things that he thinks that she wants him to do
right.
instead of asking her, instead of communicating with her. And then that leads to the whole situation degenerating, and they break apart. He ends up with Scalara, and
Scalara. Yeah.
um and that again is a mutually sort of beneficial relationship where Scalara knows that um he's not sticking around, that she's not the love of his life, but
Right.
she's looking for comfort in that time.
Right.
Um,
Right.
and then we see that she moves on to a much more fulfilling relationship.
Yeah.
And Cutter, Crocus, ultimately is going to go back to Sorry and treat her as a fully rounded human being and
Mm,
make it work in partnership with her. That
right.
this is all an exploration of the messiness of relationships without it being a melodramatic teen romance. But it's going through the motions of a lot of those things, of the dating someone and it not working out. And if we think of Camonsod's perspective of this, he's trying
Right.
to figure out what love is.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we get so much of that investigation obviously turns up in Toll the Hounds. That's when we would probably talk about a lot of the relationship stuff explicitly. But it begins in Gardens of the Moon.
It's also interesting how Sorry is the one who really leaves Cutter behind because, and this is a kind of a sacrifice of a sort. She realizes that he's trying to become more like her in order to make this relationship work. And she doesn't want him to become more like her. She doesn't want him to lose all of his innocence. And so that is a sacrifice. Maybe you could argue misguided, but she leaves in order to avoid that for him. I think that's a way of looking at that as a decision that comes from a place of love as well, isn't it?
And again, I think you're exactly right that so many of these characters, we see them in moments of sacrifice. We see them
Right.
defending other people and the reasons that they defend them. Whiskey Jack defending Silver Fox.
Mm.
Uh, Bit of a sore point, that one.
Oh dear.
Well, he didn't really have a leg to stand on.
Oh no.
But Kalam defending Quickbet, the Beak defending the Bone Hunters, the
Yeah.
sacrifices that people make.
Or even Beak defending the Tais Eater.
Mappo defending Icaria. That
Yeah.
time and time again, the friendship between Tok and Tu.
Mm.
so much of this is about the sacrifice that one person is making for another. Sometimes a person who is known, who is named, and other times the unnamed Marines who tried to defend uh, Whiskey Jack, the unnamed Marine who dies uh,
Yeah.
after being Dujack's lover, or not not Dujack,
I wasn't I couldn't remember any
not
Dujaks.
Haboric, the Chain of Dogs.
Duiker.
Duiker.
Yeah.
You can see why I went with Dujak. Duiker,
I
yes.
mean, it's pretty close. Yeah.
But and again, so many of these moments where unexpectedly someone steps in to protect someone else or has earned their loyalty, has earned their trust, has earned their love. There are a lot of those moments dotted all the way through. Why why do the bridge burners ultimately accept Perrin in Gardens of the Moon? Because he gets knifed as soon as he arrives.
Yeah.
Why do they follow Whiskey Jack so loyally? What has inspired this? These are all questions that are being asked. And then with the Bone Hunters, we see the development of all of these relationships. We see how certain people rise to prominence who inspire loyalty, who inspire these acts.
Right.
We see a lot of the questions being posed in Gardens of the Moon that the rest of the series is going to answer. And that's a lot of how I look at it.
So it's easy to see in somebody like an Animander Rake in Toll the Hounds the magnitude of the sacrifice for the Tice Andi and to give them some purpose, to also to rectify the wrongs of the past. It's and you know he's it's easy to see. It's easy to look up to a figure like him. With Tavor, there was this constant questioning of her because of her reticence, and there was the mystery of her somehow worked against her in many cases. You had many people openly doubting her at many points. You had even one of her own high fists, Blistig, who was not just complaining, but actually plotted to bring her down. You had all of that going on. Why make her so reticent? Why make her the nature of what she was really up to and the extent of the sacrifice she was making not evident to maybe the other characters as well as the readers until close to the end?
Well, I think a lot of those questions that the various characters have about Tavor are very much the questions the reader has. Those are the questions that Camonsod has,
Right.
and he doesn't have an answer for it.
Hmm.
Because and again, like I'll go back the line Ganos, I've lost her. That moment at the end,
Hmm.
not only has she sacrificed everything
Yeah.
to save Camonsod, but her motivation, the he's not her central concern. Her central concern, the thing driving her, is the sister that she has lost. What? That he cannot get a handle on her. He cannot understand her.
Right.
And even at the end, I don't think he has wrapped his head around it. So how can
Hmm.
he explore her position if he is doing this to try and figure her out and hasn't settled on an answer? Because
Yeah.
with an omniscient narrator, in the sense, obviously Camonsod knows the entirety of the story. He is omniscient for the point of view of narration.
Right.
He is looking at this and he goes, but I still don't have the answers for this.
Hmm.
No matter what way I look at this, I can't figure it out. And it's the same with Rake. Why does Rake, think of all of the questions that people ask about Rake that we see quite a lot of them matched in the text. We
Right.
even see Clip espousing that sort of, oh, well, he's overrated. The comment that certain people online, oh, he's overrated. The Clip
Yeah.
thinks he's absolutely awesome. And then the other characters who worship him and go, oh, he's absolutely amazing. You go, why? What has he done to deserve this? These are the questions that get asked when you only have that external perspective.
Right. Right.
And that is very much what Camonsod is trying to understand. I talked a bit about in the summary of this, the relationship between Tehol and Bug, I think, is one of the key aspects. But
Right.
we see other aspects of this very close relationship between gods and humans.
Hmm.
Let's take Gardens of the Moon as an example, because you have Cotillion obviously possessing Sorry.
Right.
That's that's a definite relationship between a god and a human, and it's not a particularly nice one.
Until later, it gets interesting. Yeah.
But even then, it there's guilt that Cotillion feels,
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Yeah.
and it
Yeah.
has changed him. The relationship between the mortal and the god changes the god.
Right.
We see the uh, the relationship between um, Rake and how he is perceived by these his foes.
Hmm.
This godlike figure, the Chaos Mane, the Dark Lord of Moonspawn. Think of all of those appellations that are landed on him,
Right.
but are then contradicted by when he turns up to talk to Baruch and has a friendship, quite a cordial relationship with Baruch, the High Alchemist. And then, of course, in Memories of Ice, we see his friendship with Whiskey Jack.
Yeah. Yeah.
In Toll the Hounds, we see his friendship with Kaladin Brood. That
Hmm.
again, there's gods acting in a certain way. We see Upon trying to manipulate Parent.
Right.
All of these divine figures interfering in the lives of mortals for various reasons and in various ways. That is a recurring thread all the way through. This relationship between the divine and the mundane, between the god and the mortal.
Hmm.
And I think that is part of what Calamved, or keep saying that, Camonsod
Camonsod. Yeah.
is interested in exploring about these these humans, these mortals, what fools these mortals be,
Hmm.
that he is trying to figure them out, that they're as alien to him as he is to them.
Right.
And he doesn't shy away from the abuses that the gods make, including himself, the abuses of their power, but also the abuses that humans do to each other. He looks at all of it, warts and all, because he is, I think, trying to understand this. And to understand the big picture, you have to look at the pieces that make it up.
Yeah, and perhaps the greatest mystery of all is compassion and where it comes from. And that is something that seems to genuinely be a part of what he's figuring out as he's spinning this narrative. He's wrestling with, okay, what is compassion, and why, and where does it come from? And there are lots of examples throughout the entire series, and I think multifaceted. We're looking at it from all kinds of different angles, and like you said, I mean, there's an example of Itkovian, who in some sense, he's trying to grant absolution, but that's not the same thing as redemption, is it? And maybe is it actually compassionate to grant absolution in a situation like that? So I mean, there's lots of nuance, is what I'm trying to say,
Yeah.
to Camonsod's exploration of compassion throughout the series.
But from Gardens of the Moon, like one of the very short lines that really stands out, with very small section, Pearl the demon
Hmm.
turning to Quickben and say, "Do you pity me?"
Oh yes, yeah,
That here is this demon, and as soon as you see the word demon, this powerful, magical, demonic entity, like we have this entire view that is encapsulated by the word demon. We know what a demon is.
right.
This despicable, evil, monstrous creature, and it looks at Quickben and is like, "Do you pity me? I'm
Hmm.
going to do the thing that you ordered me to do because I'm compelled to do it,
Right.
but it's going to lead to my destruction."
Facing a much more powerful foe. Yeah.
And when we see that challenging of our perception of what a demon is in this world, we leapt to a conclusion about them. and it is immediately challenged. Think of how often that happens throughout. How often something is introduced where we have made a snap judgment about it.
Right.
Oh, Gano's Paran, he's the chosen one. Nope, no, he's not.
Yeah.
Um, oh, the bridge burners, they're the scruffy heroes. They're not exactly legendary heroes, now are they? They're a bit grubbier than
Or on the
that.
other side, the Panion Seer is the evil, mad, cackling maniac. Oh, I don't know. Actually, he's a little boy who was put in a horrible position.
Um, or even Darujistan, like they're going to be they're these savages who need to be conquered by the
Mm.
civilized forces of the Malazans. And you're like, no, that one gets rocked back on its butt fairly quickly.
Yeah.
So much of this is about the the mapping of this is what we know because we've seen it, we've mapped it on. We definitively know this, and then well, actually, no. The more we know about it, the more we realize that we don't know. That
Yeah.
our ignorance has blinded us, and we leapt to conclusions that actually the evidence is a lot more complicated and it's more nuanced.
Right.
This is something that Camonsod keeps coming back to. Even like Icarium, is he a monster or is he a victim?
Yeah.
Or is it mutually exclusive? Or can he be both?
Mm.
Is Mappo evil for what Mappo does to Icarium?
Right.
Or because his heart is in the right place and he's doing it for partially good reasons, does that make him good? And then you find out, well, he actually stuffed a couple of random people into that magical sack that he has no idea whether they survived or died or what happened to. He's not a nice guy either, even though we all love Mappo.
Yeah. Yeah.
That time and time again, and that's what I love. That the darkness of the past, the things that we did in the past, has an impact on the future, but maybe is not as powerful as the actions in our present.
Mm. Well, it sounds like Steven Erikson might be describing people.
And who would have thought that for an author writing a book that they get involved in the human condition?
Yeah.
Well, my friend, we've had, I think, quite a decent chat about this.
We took a good swipe at it. Yeah.
Thank you very much for joining me.
Oh, it's always a pleasure, my friend, Nemesis. Hey, with all this complexity, do you think it's possible that someone could be both a friend and a nemesis?
A freminus?
A fremesis?
A fremesis? A nemesis?
Nah.
No, you're just evil. So, for those of you still watching, thank you very much for watching. Thank you for your continued support, and I will see you in the next one.